We are going to go ahead and get started. This is the Board of Education meeting on March 12th, 2024. We're going to start by indicating who is here. Clark, go for it.
Clark Nelson.
Karen Winder. Chris Wynn.
Connie Burgess.
Kim Chandler. Julie Jackson.
Todd Hubbard. Rich Nye.
And Nicole McDermott. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started by doing our capital and construction update.
Good afternoon, board members. It's March. Your favorite Irish tenor trio is before you today. We thought we'd go a cappella instead of big band accompaniment for our project status meeting. So
I'm looking for the bagpipes. I know that's not Irish.
yeah, that's Scottish, yeah.
I know, but I'm just saying. Next.
Shh, you're gonna have to play them now.
See, let's get it for next year.
How about a mouth harmonica?
We're not using the bagpipes because of Chris's injury today. That's...
Lucky for you.
So the security upgrades that we're under right now, really it's the implementation of the Silver Hills Security Project starting this spring. I believe we're going to start in earnest in April.
Actually, we're starting the end of March, but yes, in earnest.
In earnest in April. So Silver Hills will be on its way. Again, some upcoming projects that have bid. Hunter High Track expansion bid came back today, Silver Hills. Mandatory fuel tank upgrades at maintenance and transportation. We're looking at some secure parking here at the GEC. Still waiting on the vestibule doors to arrive. They're a long lead item. And we have out to bid Lake Ridge Elementary and West Valley parking improvements. It's really digging out soft spots in the existing parking lots, fixing those and making them functional again. Still working hard on boiler replacement and HVAC control upgrades as part of ESSER. You've had time to look at the list. Some of the newer ones coming out, Kearns Jr. only at 2%. Hunter High, when we got into the system, there was a section that used to be an old computer lab that didn't have circulating airflow, only an air conditioning system to it. And so we decided for health and safety reasons, we'll bring in regular airflow as part of the overall school. We have some projects such as Bridger finishing up nicely. Taylorsville gym AC project has been on hold awaiting the fans. Those are coming in. And so we'll start to see those air handlers installed and again get traction on that Taylorsville gym AC upgrade. A lot of chiller work happening throughout the district. Copper Hills replacing an outdated chiller. GEC cooling, again, pretty much online, but programming that through. The sisters of William Penn, Diamond Ridge, Granger, and Oakwood, all in various stages, and Woodstock of early construction, mainly on the outside, building the enclosures for the chillers and running some initial piping and equipment's on order. And so far, we've not been noticed with delays. So those elementary upgrades are coming along nicely. Let's talk a little bit about Truman L. It's been out in the community of the challenges with an asbestos release. Well, we'll talk. They've been working outside, still moving on the enclosure for the mechanical space and moving well, even given some weather delays. Now, we did have an asbestos abatement concern arise, as we were all noticed last month. We were very fortunate that the abatement is taking place behind the construction barricades that were in place at the time. So the spread really is about everything that was under construction, and you can see it in this light blue color. So those are our abatement locations. Our primary drive right now is to get the central core around the media center abated and the contractor back in there doing their backbone work of the chiller system. Then we will go down the South Hall, starting north and moving out to the south. We've had great response from the abatement contractor. For example, this week we were able to get 52 employees in the space working hard on the cleanup. So it's been progressing much faster than we originally would have thought. And so we're adjusting schedules based upon that. The consultant that we're using, R&R Environmental, good working relationship with Department of Air Quality. We have an approved mitigation plan. We're following that, and our air samples are coming back as clean. So a lot of good work. Again, we're not going to say it was planned, but we've been very fortunate that everything's been behind the construction barricades. It could have been much harder for us to navigate this asbestos release. Great example, we had a couple of classrooms that were on the periphery that we were able, they did not have air samples come back indicating asbestos, but we felt uncomfortable that they were adjacent to and clean those up rapidly. This was the clean everything, take the carpet out, which is most likely to hide fibers, replace the subfloor, put the carpet down. The subfloor and the carpet were planned as part of this remodel anyway, and we were able to do that in less than a week. So we were moving very quickly. So these are some pictures of just how quickly we're able to move through based upon the level of effort put back by the abatement contractor. And also our maintenance teams, who were the ones that were going to do the subfloor and the carpet. So our teams have been out there working hard alongside advancing the cause. You or me on this one? You want to go?
I'll go, sure.
Sure.
Good afternoon, good evening, board members. Westlake Junior High, we are, as you've seen some slides, making really good progress there. You'll see things where we've been dropping in the countertops on top, or cabinets, and then sinks and countertops in the administration wings, the academic wings. The administration wing also has cabinets ready to be installed. In the serving areas, you'll see some wall tile going in, and much of the HVAC ductwork is complete, which is a good sign. As far as the slides go, there's an overall looking northeast a little bit there, mostly north of the track behind the school to the west of the school, and the school we'll get a close-up of the media center there and the teacher collaboration on that south end with that 2-story volume of glass, which is going to be an awesome space. But it's coming along. You can see the site there. Again, blow up of that area I was just talking about. Oh, this is actually the north area. The north area, which is the cafeteria on the left, it's got the glazing going in there. And then the preparation for floor tile in the kitchen area where the red is on the ground there. There's a large sink in these group restrooms that have the large sink going in there with wall tile behind. Second story, just past the media center looking again north. And you can see the railings are going in there and getting ready for glass shortly. Sound panels in the auditorium there on the left, and on the right, acoustic treatment in our gymnasium. So both those large 2-story spaces are coming along as well. Communication wiring there, blue wire, and the elevator installation is in progress, which is good. And there are no change orders that needed to be brought before the board this month for Westlake.
And what's the move-in date again?
Well, we are pushing. That is to be determined still. We have a contract date, and we're pushing hard on that. There are a couple of things out of our control right now we're working hard on to get back into our control. Some suppliers and some bigger air handler pieces of equipment. So we're working with the school and know that it'll be this summer, but we don't have an exact date, depending on when we get those last pieces of HVAC equipment.
But we do expect to start this fall.
Yes,
There.
yeah.
Yeah, that, okay.
I'm curious if there'll be any opportunity to tour the building before it opens.
So we actually had a conversation today about ribbon cuttings and official acts, and we were going to push that till after the start of school. But for the board, as an example, we can do that. It might actually be a great time to walk as teachers come back, just maybe that week before kids come back. That probably is a great opportunity for us to get in, and the board members can take a look if that's okay.
I think think Chris is going to take Cypress.
Yeah.
You want the, oh, yeah, you want the
And
microphone?
the poor guy, again.
Good evening, members of the board. So on Cypress High School, we're at all different kinds of stages at construction because that site's being constructed all at once. We have everything from the site work where we're outlining all of the athletic fields right now. You can see the fields really start taking shape instead of large gray muddy masses. They're actually starting to see the outlines of the fields. Then you go into the athletics building, which it's really getting quite a bit near completion. We've got some of the things around the track that are being done, lockers are being placed, the pool area is being painted, windows are being finished. It's really getting quite close. And then in between is the very large administration commons academic building where we have different levels. Like, for example, we had to replace quite a bit of plumbing underneath on the first floor, and that slab on grade is finally, after all that work's been repaired. And then we're now framing, drywalling, quite a bit of the academic areas. Quite a bit of the glazing is being installed, which is going a long ways to protecting the space as we're, knock on wood, tail ending the end of our cold season here over the next 6 to 8 weeks. We're now having quite a bit of the glazing's already been in on some of the academic and administration area, but the rest of the academic wing, we're putting on that. And as you go up a little bit even higher on the building towards the auditorium side, we're actually putting finish paint on it and getting ready for finishes on that. So you can kind of see almost a cut sheet of the entire construction process all on one site right now. Really exciting to see the performing arts building with the curtain wall in different areas going in around the lobby. The lobby is no longer quite the open air experience it's been for the last 6 to 8 months. Even though the view is great, the view with the glazing is still pretty good. It's not quite open air. As you can see, just talking about the fields are going from mud to an outline of mud. The generators being set in place. Next slide. As you can see, the track area is really starting to resemble the finished product. The locker rooms, most of you have been in those locker room areas when we were first putting drywall on them. They are heading towards the finishes in a hurry in those locations. The pool area, which was, I think when we toured, was a big mass of dirt in there, is starting to move towards the final areas. And then the administration building, and then I think the commons or the social studies wing on the one end are kind of the tail end of the, plus the first floor on the academic and administration building. The rest of it is really starting to move quite a bit forward. We've actually poured this slab where it's showing that prep on the right-hand side. You can see, like I said, the drywall, is completing framing on some of the classrooms on some levels, whereas other levels we're in a finished paint scenario. So kind of all stages to all people at once. And for example, the social studies wing, which is nearest over by the auditorium, is looking a lot more like what the finished product for the whole building would look like. And then, like I indicated, the curtain wall and glazing around the auditorium lobby area, it truly is probably one of the best performing arts facilities that I've seen, and certainly probably the best constructed in a high school I've seen in a really long time. Quite a few of the high schools I've worked on in the last 10, 15 years have moved away from this style, but this is really a magnificent facility. And we don't have any changes for the Cypress portion of the project to bring before the board. Academics at Skyline is, the moment we've all been waiting for. We're moving rapidly on all different levels to complete this project and move in and occupy this summer. We've been having ongoing meetings with staff about moving into their portion as soon as school gets out, and the long talks that are going to ensue with getting everything out of that building so we can demolish the old academic building. We're not quite in the stage where we're burning the boats, so you can't go back, but close. So we're making great progress. As you walk through the building, there's certainly places that look like they're ready to move in. So lots of paint, lots of finishes, lots of carpet, tile. Tile's been going for a couple months. The main commons area, a lot of the storefront glass is all in now. That whole building area is enclosed. The glass has been really moving really well even since we started it kind of in December. Plumbing fixtures, main cabinet installation's been going on for a while. Lots of finishes, lots of trim. If you were to look at it, you'd look down the hallway and say, oh, are we going to get there? And then you go into the classroom wings, and the classroom wings are done. So we're very pleased with the current progress on the academic building. If anybody's got some wood to knock on, that would be helpful. I appreciate that. Thank you. If we could go ahead and move forward to the photos. As you can see, we've got carpet protection going on, ceiling grid, light fixtures are in. We're getting very close to completion on that. A lot of the millwork has been installed. Millwork has been a question and concern for us just because of the enormous amount of millwork that's going into this facility. But the millwork person, as you can see on the right, is keeping up with us right now in our installations. Next slide, please. Plumbing fixtures are in. The exterior glass has been going on for a while, but in the cafeteria commons area, it really defines that space. It's a very large open space, and with the glass on there, you really get the scale of what it looks like. And then the last thing we need to do, get the fixture stuff and hung, and so we can get the stairs covered. And we had originally, that's probably maybe the very last area. All the rest of it is moving. Like the picture here on the left in the administration suite area, it looks like we're going to move in. And we will move the staff in as soon as school gets out into this portion of the building. Cabinets are being sold. Like I said, the millwork is moving really well on that. Next, please. Thank you. Media Center. So there is this pool athletics entrance, that was tied to the academic wing instead of being tied to the athletic building. And it's actually been given a temporary certificate of occupancy by the fire marshal, so we could technically use that. The school is elected to kind of hold off on that until we get a little closer towards the end on that. But that's a school operational issue. Next slide, please. Testing center is moving right along. We'll be finishing up that space here. And then the question that seems to be on a lot of the students' mind about the smoothie bar and things, as long as we're establishing what the priorities for the facility are, I think we're in good shape. So once again, we're pushing very, very hard. Most of all of the procurement items are tracking or on site or we have received. There's just always a few things like, Justin mentioned that we are watching very closely to make sure that everybody's keeping their commitments as far as those being completed. I don't think there's another slide after that. Okay. The other thing that I was asked to make sure and cover is something that we've been investigating and working on is netting for the athletic fields, partially because of some issues with balls flying, but for the most part, it's about a protection of the existing brand new facilities. The chain link in the industry, it's called fabric, even if it's made of metal. The chain link has been pretty heavily used and abused over the last well, since the field was occupied, and in order to protect the facility as well as create a little bit higher of a net to protect the windows, both on the athletic side and then on the neighbor side, is we have been in the process of looking for, I originally had gone out and gotten some pricing, but in order to meet district procurement, there's a procurement going on right now. And that we hope to be able to bring that to the next session for your board's approval. The money would come out of athletic contingency, would be part of the funds that have already been approved for the project. But we recommend for both the protection of the facility and for the long-term safety and such that these nets be installed on the athletic facilities, on the lacrosse field and soccer field.
So when you say the fences are wearing down, is that because kids are climbing on them and climbing over them? Or?
No, the balls are hammering and deforming the chain link to 2 to 3 feet. You know, basically, you know, when you install chain link on there and you hit it with soccer balls and lacrosse balls, it starts to deform. Does that make sense? And it's deformed in some places a foot, 1.5 feet, 2 feet, and long-term would probably have to be replaced sooner rather than later. Plus, the netting, the fence right now is 20 feet. On the athletic building, some of those windows extend up above that. Windows have been hit. None of them have been broken so far. We feel a 30-foot net would help to protect not just the fence itself, but the athletic building, as well as keep balls from flying outside.
How many of our other high schools have a net versus the chain link protection, if any?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any. We have I think part of the issue that's caused us a little bit of frustration up there is squeezing those fields in between the north property line and our pool that we kept and maintained throughout the course of construction. It forced our designers to shoehorn those fields in there. And by doing so, the security fencing that goes up 20 feet is right there on the edge of the field. And so they're taking, as kids are kicking goals or throwing lacrosse balls, and they're missing the goal, they're hitting the fence, and it's caused some damage. So the nets will slow that down. We'll have to go back and tighten up those fences so that they still are a security element. They didn't work as one, as far as both security and a backstop, just because they're so close. Olympus, for instance, that fence is a little further behind the goal, and so you have a further travel distance for that ball to go before it starts to really take damage to that fence. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that what you're saying is that's because I was like, why didn't we do netting in the first place? And it's because chain link has traditionally worked just fine. Is that right?
Well, it's partially because of the distance, like Justin said, because the goal is literally up against the chain link, and so when you're getting the velocity up against there, netting doesn't serve a security function like chain link does, right? Mm-hmm. And with the netting on the inside, that would protect both the fence and then also keep the balls from going up against the building. The space there is very compressed, like Justin indicated.
So this is also not an issue at Cypress, right?
It's not, and the nice thing there is the fields are going with the building, not perpendicular to the building, so we won't have the same problem at Cypress with space and or the building being hit with balls.
And to be clear, you're going to need us to approve basically a change order, but it should not cost any more because it's just moving money from a budget that's already been
It's an expense.
budgeted.
It won't be a change. It'll be a new contract. We're not using Hughes for this, but a new vendor, new contract.
Yeah, we would be pulling money out of Hughes's contract to give to a vendor outside of it. We would manage the work. This isn't a change to Hughes's contract, so there's not the Hughes's markups. There's not the Hughes's oversight. There's not. It's taking money out of the approved project budget to give to a vendor to install these outside of Hughes's contract.
It's just a new procurement, and that's why we need to approve it.
That is correct.
Okay.
So I'm skeptical that there's no additional charge here. So you could tell me more about the contingency that the funding is coming from?
Yeah, within the Skylines phased, multiple phases, and within each of those phases, there are allowances and contingencies for each one. In the athletics phase, which is, we haven't closed it out for the records, but it's done. It's the pool, the tennis, all the athletic venues. There was some leftover money. There was monies that weren't used in that in that athletic phase of construction that all monies get returned to the owner, right, that aren't used. And so that's where this athletic allowance that Chris mentioned would be used to cover this netting. Did that answer your question?
I think so. I mean, fair to say, though, that there are other buckets, for lack of a more technical term. There are other buckets where we are overdrawn, so to speak, that those contingencies could have gone to cover, but for this necessity of a net. Is that fair?
So we are, to your first point, there are other, yes, the current academic phase that we're building, which also is what we're going to open this year, but it also continues into 26 when we finish the performing arts phase. So this phase that we're working on right now and that bucket of money has to last us a little longer, right, to get all the way through performing arts. And so we're monitoring that as well. But as the athletics got closed up and we realized we're done with construction of athletic venues, there are monies that were there for contingency that are to be rolled over, but we're going to use them for this, if you will. So, yeah, I hope that answered
Thank you.
your question.
Are there any other questions on Skyline? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks for being here, Chris, with your arm sling. All right, we're going to turn the time over to Ben to give us a legislative recap.
Good evening. We have quite a wrap-up for you tonight, and I think the good Dr. Nye and Todd Haber are prepared to jump in on a couple bills. This was a challenging session, and so if my body language or some other adjective slips out of my mouth, I apologize in advance and ask Lisa to strike that from the record. So we've got, we're going to go over a couple bills. We're going to hit on the highlights of the revenue pieces, and then a couple bills that we think are most pertinent in terms of challenges or difficulties to the district, in particular to our budget. This is a very difficult financial year. And then describe the compliance process at the end of this cycle. So if you're not familiar with our tracking sheet, this is hyperlinked here for you, and it's actually still linked on our homepage at graniteschools.org. You can look at our tracker. We take that tracker, we take out all the bills that really have nothing to do with the district per se, or won't require any adjustments, policy changes, or compliance components, and turn that into a compliance tracker, which we then color code and assign out to the respective division and or assistant superintendent, BA, and then the director from there to follow up on. The USBE also sends out a board book at the end of each session. We usually make a hard copy of that for you just in case you want something to reference, but it usually has some sort of local LEA action required piece on that. So we're awaiting that, their interpretation of state laws to be able to start that compliance process and procedure. This was a screenshot of the last day of the session. 934 bills were available. 150 of those were education related in some form or fashion or another and had some sort of component for us. So that means, again, about 500, that breaks down to 585 House bills and 277 Senate bills. I took out all the resolutions that are non-binding. 591 bills, including resolutions, passed at a 63% rate. You can see the numbers from previous sessions. So this was a record. Although being in the high 400s and the low 500s is not out of the question. I went back about 10 years and there was a few that breached the 500 range. So, but 591 bills is a new record. Roughly 18% of those being education related and a 61% pass rate on those education related bills. I took the 89 bills that we were tracking. That's not all of the bills that JLC was tracking. To be honest, they track a number of rural related bills that are not on our tracker, or we don't track because they don't have any sort of implication for us. Of those 89 bills, 78 had JLC positions of support or oppose, and that's the breakdown in terms of JLC's support and opposition, and you can see kind of a success rate there as well. I'm going to turn some time over to Todd to kind of walk through the funding sources here.
So on this slide, this is just to represent what the overall state budget is, all funding sources at $29.4 billion. You have a chance to look there on that left-hand donut is 25% of that comes from income tax, just as a point of reference. And then when you look on where it goes, 29% goes to public education. And the lion's share actually goes to the social services. So this is human services, health department, workforce services, when you take the whole picture. So we're talking a lot of federal funds that go into that area. If you go to the next page, this is where does the state funding go? And in this case, public education, of the $12.9 billion, 45% goes to public education. And a little different than the full budget picture, but this is the one we normally look at when we say, how is the state supporting public education? It's this ratio that we're most interested in that has to do with income tax and sales tax. If we go to the next slide, we'll just hit up some of the larger pieces on the ongoing increases. The WPU did increase by 5%. Student enrollment was funded, and this is a little bit of a misnomer for this year. Actual student enrollment dropped, but the funding through the growth formula grew because of special education and at-risk funding receiving some additional dollars. So it actually offset a declining year in enrollment, which is kind of, haven't had that before. So we're getting into new territory as we try to account for dollars. The at-risk program received its fourth year of growth for $28 million towards its prescribed ratios. But a side note on that is that was not new money. That came from a number of programs being eliminated. So it was a shift of dollars into the at-risk. The Utah First All Scholarship increased by an additional $40 million. It's almost doubling. It had $42 million last year, $40 million this year. So as they come up and running, they'll have about $82 million available for that program. And then the first piece of school safety is $2 million for security systems. So this is ongoing money. And then if you jump over to the next column on the one-time funding, there's an additional $100 million in school safety grants that will be available to the LEAs across the state. So those are two pieces there. Also on the one-time funding side, we have a new program, Excellence in Education and Leadership, $150 million, which is an opportunity to look at how educators are compensated moving forward in the state system. An important piece is the school property insurance. When they went through the risk assessment for insurance, they were looking at a 60% increase in our insurance premium. So they set aside $100 million, created a captive within the insurance program to keep the increase down. In our case, it was still going to be about 28%. So it'll be a hefty lift when we get into our budget season. The educator professional time continues for another year. This is $74 million. Last year it was I'm going to get this wrong, $64 million. This increase here is to provide more money so that the funds flow out to the teachers on their individual basis of compensation instead of on an average. At least that's the attempt in the math formula there. We do have funding for school fee amendments, which basically is in the next 3 years, school fees will come to an end. And the legislature is providing $35 million one time for us to step down into that. Now, it's not all school fees, and we can spend some more time on school fees as to what's in, what's out, and what happens. But we have a time frame and some dollars from the state to get us to a new fee environment.
Was there any talk at all of upping the WPU in the future to help us out with that fee, those school fees? Or is this, we get the one time and that's it?
So we received the one time. I don't know that I can say that's it, because we have 2 more years before that's it happens.
Sure.
And we felt during the session that the 5% increase in the WPU should not be part of compensating for the loss of school fees, because that felt inappropriate to say, hey, we're giving you a bunch of money and then we take money away from you. But into the future, I'm sure we'll be making arguments to get some ongoing dollars available. Additional monies for teacher supply, and then another program to provide stipends for new teachers coming into the profession. Go to the next page. This is where the magic happens and where the LFA makes all their money. And that is, where did the dollars really come from and where did they really go? So on this first part, I had mentioned that at-risk received an increase, but it came at the expense of early literacy, elementary school counselors, Title I paraeducators. Those programs were eliminated, and their dollars were redirected into at-risk. Some other unexpected pieces were that the equity pupil increase. So this is whenever the value of the WPU increases, there's a separate formula that puts 0.5% into the guarantee programs for the voted leeway and the board local levy, which we participate in. They inserted in statute a deferral. Actually, not really a deferral, a delay. So instead of being enacted this year, it's enacted next year. So 2026 is when that goes into place. That was worth about $26 million that didn't make it into this legislative cycle. And they also took unallocated monies in the voted and board guarantee programs of $50 million. Typically, when you get to the end of the fiscal year, those dollars will be redistributed among all the participants in that guarantee program. That will not be happening. They have redirected that to fund next year's funding items. So just some interesting things that should have happened that aren't. And then it goes a little deeper there. If you recall, this year, $126 million was scheduled to go into the Permanent School Trust Fund out of the income tax fund. It hadn't been transferred yet. So the legislature was able to capture that money in transit and redirected it, and they recalled $86 million of the $126 to balance this year's budget. So just an interesting exercise. It just goes to show that you don't have your money until June 30th of the year you're in. $40 million was reversed out of the economic stabilization account. So at the beginning of the session, they passed the base budget bills. And we pay attention to that because that should have the inflationary growth factor in it. It should have the enrollment growth increase in it, and it should have the next deposit into the economic stabilization account. Well, it was there in House Bill 1, and then they reversed it out in Senate Bill 2. Again, they took ongoing dollars that should have gone into those commitments. And some of us feel that that was backtracking on our Amendment G promises, because that's one of the big 3. Didn't happen. As I had some conversations, the feeling out of the LFA's office was that we were so close to the cap that we wouldn't notice this. It wasn't necessary. So $40 million ongoing was redirected. And then in our TSSA accounts, there was seed money back a number of years to start the program, because it's basically funded out of the WPU calculation, but it's state dollars that go in. The very first year didn't have any money happening because that formula was forward-looking, and so they had to put some money in to start it. They've pulled out their seed money to balance the budget as well, so this is $15 million that was ongoing that has come out. On a happy note, since I don't always want to be a downer, is that the provisions or the commitments to the passage of constitutional amendment for this fall is provided. So the $86 million for the 2% increase in the value of the WPU and funding for the enrollment drop hold harmless provision is financed. It sits in the flexible allocation fund. It won't be allocated until the outcome of the election is known. But they did set the dollars aside, so that's positive.
So they set the dollars aside for 1 year only, right?
So these are ongoing dollars.
The 2% WPU increase is ongoing for how long?
Until they decide not to fund it. So it's available upon passage of the constitutional amendment if it does back into the income tax fund.
How does that, I wasn't aware that, I thought that was a one-time deal. I knew that the enrollment drop hold harmless was ongoing. You're saying that's been funded and put in the budget for however long until they decide not to, but when they look at the WPU, then will they say, yeah, we gave you a 5% increase, 2% of that is that constitutional amendment? Or will it be the 5% plus the constitutional amendment?
Yeah, this is an additional commitment. So the 5% is
It
in
will
our
always be
budget.
shown as
It will
above.
flow to us July 1st. The additional 2% is contingent upon a passage of the constitutional amendment.
Okay.
So then that will be ongoing dollars also, but won't show up until that condition is met.
Did you want to talk about the amendment?
Yeah,
I'm
so,
more on
but
the
I
other
think
side.
I'm with you, Julie, like, can I just, let me preface, I'm being cynical here, I'll just say that. But let's say next year's legislative session and they're like, oh, we can give them a 3% WPU because it's really 5. I think that's kind of the core of your thing is how do we know we're gonna get a good, well, I
But
don't
it
know if it's how
actually
you
is
can-
additional.
But it's an actual additional 2% instead of them just saying, well, that 2%'s there already, so we're just gonna try to pull it
The
off as
2%
one.
covers your school fees, or, like that.
Yeah, just something like
you know,
that. So I
making
guess,
some
how
things-
does that work? Is there gonna be 2 separate WPU amounts, I guess?
I'll see you're cynical and add. So you could take that same argument and say, oh, we could have had 7% this year, because these are this year's dollars. It's not even a future event. Could have happened this year.
So what happens if education groups support this, but it still doesn't pass? Are they still holding that over our heads? It feels like they're holding it over our heads, sorry. I'm just gonna say
100%.
that.
If
That was a
education
rhetorical
groups.
question, right?
Moving on to the next slide.
But can I just ask, these things up here, I'm a person who's been, I would say paying attention more than, your regular folk. These 6 bullet points above the constitutional amendment are all news to me. When did these things happen? Are they things that happened on the last day when they passed the budget? Or was I just not looking in the right place for this information?
So these are the things that happened in the second to last Executive Appropriations Committee. So after all of the subcommittees propose their budget allocations, Executive Appro then sifts those and prioritizes those. There's caucus meetings to identify what will be funded, and then it's up to the LFA's office to figure out how to pay for it.
Okay.
And so these are the things that come out through that executive appropriations. And so if you're interested, you can go into their website, you can go to that meeting, you can see what the priority list is, and then there's usually another page that no one ever talks about. It's on there. You can go pull it up, and that's where these types of things start to show up. How did they actually balance the overall budget? What were the internal transfers needed to make all those dollars available? And that's where I've gone. I've just gone in and said, okay, how did they actually make this work?
I will say, outside of, House leadership or Senate leadership, that Executive Appropriations Committee is the most powerful committee. Because it's kind of like the buck stops there. Everybody can have their fund requests, everybody can put their hopes and dreams on the list, and then essentially it comes down to them. So if you want to befriend those on that committee, that'd probably be wise.
There was another component of this, Todd, feel free to chime in, that gang prevention money got rolled out as that at risk. It's going to be funded this year one time. And then Representative Lisaby, who alerted us to that concern, so she's going to try and find another ongoing funding source. But the goal of that was, you guys recall, towards the beginning of the session, those of you who are part of JLC, that was going to get rolled out with a number of other pots.
Yeah, so there was actually two that were restored on a one-time basis. So you've mentioned the gang prevention and interventions. The other is the high poverty teacher
Bonus.
stipends.
Yep.
Those are also to end. There's one-time money this upcoming year, and then there's not a known funding source into the future.
So those are our big checks that we do at the end of the year from the previous school year. And in talking to the sponsor, SB 173 is intended to replace all those, and I'll speak to that bill here in a second. So with that wonderful news, why don't we go ahead and move on to even more exciting stuff. Here's all your school safety and security bills. You can see the position of JLC on the right side of that. NP stands for no position. We had an initial meeting on HB 84. It's an 89-page bill, and this is $1 million bill to implement with the School Guardian program, and requires millions and millions of dollars. Sorry, Don just gave me a look. Thanks. Depending on which option we choose, it's either hiring armed security, getting volunteers, and or paying for law enforcement in every school. We have to have armed security in every school location while school is in session. That's what this bill requires. Implementation we expect to be fall of 2025. There's just no way we can implement. So
They allocated $100 million for that. Granite
that
will
is
get
one-time
10
money.
Okay.
And is intended to address, and feel free to correct me, Todd, the pieces like the panic alarms.
Yeah.
The
equipment.
Yeah. The other capital pieces as part of that.
And so just to be clear, it's very early in the game, and we do not have a plan yet of how to make this happen in fall of 2025.
Well, fall of there are certain components that actually we're still dissecting the bill.
The Guardian has to be done by 2025,
That's my understanding.
fall of 2025. Okay.
So there, but there are other
People
components.
ask me, how are you going to do that? And I keep saying,
We don't know.
We don't know yet.
Yeah, so the funding piece is going to be a huge part of that, the 100 million, whether that comes out in grants or other pieces. So we anticipate bringing those figures to you at some point in time in the near future. So
I have
today
a
was our
question.
very first look at that bill.
Is this every single school, every elementary?
Every elementary,
GTI,
every junior high, armed
Granite
security.
Connect, every school that is functioning in Granite?
Correct.
Including special schools.
Yes, every school.
And to be clear, I mean, that 100 million sounds nice, but this is not going to cover ongoing costs. And I think that's something we need to tuck away behind. It's a little frustrating because on paper, it looks like it's funded. In reality, the ongoing funding is not going to support that. So that's something, maybe Rich can speak to that, but I'm kind of anticipating somehow, some way, we've got to absorb that into the budget.
We won't be using our school fees to fund it either.
I know, it's fine.
A new curricular fee for security.
So as part of this bill, given the comprehensive nature of it, there's still significant work from the State Board of Education that they have to put in place and the state security chief. So we will receive significant guidance on implementation and expectation, including timelines and resources perhaps to help with that. It would be beneficial, I believe, to the board at some point to have a study session on this bill itself as we work through some implementation efforts.
Do we have a timeline on when the state will have some of that?
I have not seen an updated
Nothing?
timeline.
Okay.
If I were to anticipate, I would say going into the summer.
Yeah.
There were some initial conversations had by Chief Porter and the state, Roger and somebody else met with him, and with the concept of understanding that timeline and some other pieces of this. So we're hoping for more information sooner than later. And we can have a comprehensive study session to discuss how we're going to fund that.
I'd like to make sure our teachers know that they are not going to be asked to carry or to be a guardian. They're not going to be asked to do that. I believe they could volunteer if they wanted.
So there's two components.
Our teacher
There's
cannot
actually
volunteer?
a school guardian and there's a school security person. A teacher can be that school security person, but they're not actually asked to carry a weapon or be that guardian piece. They're two separate roles.
Oh, and do you need one or the other, or you do
You
have to have the
both.
guardian? Oh,
Yes.
you have to have
The
both.
school guardian is the armed enforcer and they cannot be a classroom teacher.
Just feedback, I've had teachers asking me about it. It'd be good if they were clear on at least what we do know for them.
Yeah, part of the bill does entertain when there's instances where there are lack of options and or lack of volunteers in a school, particularly rural schools had and districts had concerns with this, that there can be exceptions to who the school guardian is as determined by the state security chief.
Okay, 362 was juvenile justice revisions. We worked on this bill during the interim, and this turned out quite well, and we feel good about some of the components of that bill. Those were some enhancements that we asked for and some other pieces that needed to take place in terms of definitions. HB 347 had no position from JLC, although there was a vigorous discussion. I put this in the school safety and security bill. Concern with this bill is that we'll invite litigation upon us, but it basically requires that we take into consideration safety and security of the other students in a classroom space as it relates to a student who might be prone to violence or other concerns of that nature. So there's no funding attached to that to help support any findings and to go through that process. HB 418 student offender reintegration amendments had no position. This is a bill that we did work on. I don't want to say we supported it. It's something we're already striving to do, but requires notification and planning with victims when they have been a victim of a violent crime within a school. That could be as minimal as sexual assault to a weapon or some other nature that we have to collaborate with them and law enforcement before we're allowed to bring that student offender back into a school environment. We've already talked about several of these funding and finance bills. I'm not going to go into any details on this except to say that I think HB 497 might have been the best bill of the legislative session. I think it was 2 lines long, and it was the only bill that I could find that actually retracted some regulation. So props to Representative Peterson. He is our friend of education recipient for the year. We'll get on that. Any of these you want to speak to, Todd? I think particular SB 208 and 268 were hot conversations the last few days of the session. You don't want to speak to them, or you want me to?
So, not really.
All right.
But these are, so the housing and transit reinvestment zones, these are TIF programs, so tax increment finance programs. So there were some amendments to 208 that were designed to improve based on recent experience that they had with the last 3 TIFs in the Salt Lake Valley area. And out of that, complaints were the school district had very low representation. So out of 11 committee members, we were 1. And so we were able to get a second vote, but then they made the committee 13. So I think the math still works out that we're better off. 2 out of 13 better than 1 out of 11. But anyway.
We had fought for equal representation in terms of our contributions, which are the largest portion of this.
Yep. So we got closer, and so that was progress.
In terms of a mile, we got
to make up for my
a marathon.
slide.
Yeah. Progress is progress. 217 was a district bonding bill. Sorry, I wanted to speak to 225. This bill basically codified the bulk of our boundary adjustment process. There was a couple pieces we had some confusion over. I think we worked through a couple of those, but we're going to review that one more time just to make sure there's not any needed adjustments to our current process and procedure. Any other questions on this particular?
Did we fix the deal on the boundary amendment where you can close
Yes.
several schools in one?
No,
okay.
But the language is such that we still feel like we can proceed. We just have to hold two separate votes.
Yeah, okay.
So within a board meeting, instead of just voting for a study in future, you will have to vote for each of the studies individually, whether it's a closure study or a boundary adjustment. And then when you go to vote for those on the back end, you can't vote to approve the study. You will have to vote for each of those closures independently. On the school fees, we've already discussed that. I didn't want to kick that horse anymore. It's already down. General education bills, there's a couple here. There's a couple of unfunded mandates here. HB 121, educator background check amendments. We've actually funded this out of our own pockets just for our own benefits. It's a small amount. It's a few $1,000s a year, but again, no funding. The HB 192, this was a very bad bill, and we got it to be not as smelly and as bad as good as we were going to get in terms of its passage. So with respect to that, it will require us to potentially enhance or change some of our paid leave procedures to ensure they line up with state, what the state offers. So there could be some changes there that we'll have to make, again, unfunded mandates. And I'm not going to go into any of these others. SB 64 was a cleanup bill that we liked, but now with that program going away, it's kind of a moot point. So, but we want to still pass it just in case SB 173 was unsuccessful. And you can see SB 173 there. We'll change, allow for enhanced compensation for our teachers if they meet certain criteria which have not been established yet. There is no metric there, which was the big concern for JLC. SB 221, we had an H on that. This could potentially cost us some money as well as part of realigning our boundaries. Maybe that was SB 225. It was Bramble's bill, and we ran some numbers on that. That could potentially cost us $700,000 in revenue.
Yeah, so what that bill does is if you have a school district that is in a single municipality and they border other districts and that municipality annexes an area, the school district boundary will move with the annexation upon agreement of the two board chairs of the two school districts involved. So we will, we've already been approached, and so Salt Lake School District has talked about this before, and that's where the numbers bend is coming up from. We've looked at what the parcels are that would be involved. Murray would be another school district that is, again, a school district in a single municipality that borders us. Haven't heard anything from them, but yeah, there are some conversations that are coming, and we have to have the conversations. That was the problem that was being resolved, was two districts were not talking to each other when this type of a situation arose, and so now we get to talk to each other.
SB 173, I think I remember that is something where there's a pot of money, and if districts want to participate, they can. And then we can also, if we want to, then we would set up what that system would look like for our teachers. So my question is, are we considering being a part of that, or have we thought about it yet? Is it too early to
I think
say?
it's too soon, hashtag.
Okay.
So
Let me know.
there's
Keep me in
$100
the
million
know.
in revenue though, so I think we'd be remiss to not look at the opportunity to enhance our teacher pay through that pot of money. So that's just, that was Ben speaking for himself over here. Curriculum bills, sensitive materials review. We've already worked through some potential changes to our current process to streamline that. And your book committee parents should not be receiving any additional books at this point in time, as we're in the process of revising that. We hope to have that cleaned up in the next week or so. There's nothing that says we can't start implementation on that, even though the date is May. So we'll be updating you on that as soon as that's completed. Student survey amendments. You can no longer survey students. There has to be an actual opt-in from parents to participate in non-academic surveys. And so we just got to, we've traditionally, that has been our protocol and process within our district, is to require parental permission for any non-academic surveys. But the big survey this is geared towards is the SHARP survey will no longer be an opt-out for parents, but parents will have to physically sign and authorize their students to be able to participate along with any other comparable pieces of legislation. Equal opportunity initiatives, this is the DEI bill. I think this has minimal impact on us. It was more geared towards higher education, but we'll be reviewing that just to make sure we're in compliance. Public school history curriculum amendments. This was the 10 Commandments bill, as well as the Magna Carta can now be used as it's part of that list that's already available for resources that can be used in history curriculum and classes. HB 331 is the potty training bill. So it does allow us to prevent enrollment of students who are not potty trained. Obviously, there's exceptions for special education. There's a couple of failed bills that I wanted to bring your attention to. And the reason I talk about failed bills is because failed bills 1 year end up being going through interim on occasion and coming back to haunt us in the future. You can see we were opposed to all of these bills. 161 and 173 and 354 all had a common component that they could allow any sort of policy or tax increase to be referendum. So within a 7-day period, they could, if you passed a tax increase like this board did last June as part of the budget process and cycle, within a 7-day period, they could start gathering signatures, make notification. That could really hamstring our budget process for several months while we wait the outcome of a potential referendum. The school board amendments one, the 161, would have been on any sort of policy or legislative action. So parents don't like this. School calendar is approved by the Board of Education. There's a referendum. So, and then the truth in taxation revisions, 354 was a version that would not have allowed us to increase taxes in certain years. And obviously, it's a little bit frustrating for the legislature to tell us that if we need that funding to go increase taxes, and then they hamstring our ability to do so. So, kind of speaking out of both sides of the mouth there. HB 303 was the school curriculum requirements. This bill dealt with pride flags and other components and had some additional restrictions. It codified a number of pieces that are already in state board rule. And this was attempted to be lifted to take just a few components of that original drafted legislation that had actually been started way back in interim last year and insert that into another bill on the last night of the legislative session 2 different times, and it failed on both circumstances. So I do expect a component of that bill to come back at some point in time. So any questions about legislation? I'm going to go ahead and move into our compliance process and to-do list. We have a compliance committee, and the superintendent is a glutton for punishment, apparently, has requested to be a part of that compliance review committee. So Joe Kramer, who works in Doug Larson's department, and Doug and I had been that compliance committee, and then we would dole out assignments to various groups. But Todd and the superintendent will also be a part of that committee moving forward. That document includes if there's a needed change for policy, language from USBE on any sort of LEA action, and then we track implementation of any policy changes and or how some of those bills are just we need to be aware of. Some of them require procedural changes and or process changes or policy changes. So this is going to be a huge lift this year. We're already seeing a number of bills that will require policy changes. Did you want to speak to that, Superintendent?
Yeah, I would just say that's not any indication of the previous committee's ability to do the work. I would just say the complexity of this session and the vast number of bills that are passed. It's an expectation of us by the legislature, by the state board, by our citizens, right, when these bills pass, is to implement them and implement them well in the short runway that they give us. And so it's just going to take a little bit more effort coordinating across multiple departments to make sure that we're brought into compliance and we're doing it well. So Todd and I are going to be able to help with that lift. And then there's levels of accountability that are also included in that we want to make sure that our employees know what is expected per the law, as there are significant numbers of these laws that actually affect the day-to-day work that occurs in the classroom and just extends beyond the district office and compliance and reports, but actually what occurs in our schools. So.
That being said, if there's any other questions or concerns, I would say in 12 years of following the legislature closely, this was a really difficult year in terms of the amount of bills and the type of bills that we saw. So here's hoping it can only get better next year. So any other thoughts or questions? Otherwise, that concludes my presentation.
Just again, thanks for the gargantuan effort on the part of our leadership, because it was, I lifted this much and was exhausted from it, and they were up there all the time, and I think that your efforts made a difference on many of those pieces of legislation, so thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you. All right, with that, we will go ahead and take a recess and convene back